Welcome back to Precious Metal Gents, episode 33. I'm Zan. I'm here with Brian, and today we're kicking off our one of one series. Main segment's going to be a little bit of a sort of an intro presentation. Won't get too far into the weeds with it, but we want to have two or three episodes featuring one of ones and kind of look at some prominent one of ones over the past 25 years. People that collect them, the best, the worst of. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Last week, playoff picks. I think you were 3-3. I was 4-2. You tried to pretend you were 4-2, right?
Yeah, I pretended I was 4-2 just because I didn't really commit to picking the Packers. I just wanted to explain how they could win, so I tried to play like both sides with that one. But I'll take the 3-3.
We both picked the Vikings last week, and when I picked the Vikings, I got a message from Ragnar Cards, who's a great Rams collector. He's a listener of our show. But he said, I'm going to boycott your show because he's a Rams fan. You picked the Vikings. I'm like, man, the Vikings are going to beat him. He was like, nope, Rams are going to beat him by at least 17. We're going to sack Stafford. He like reeled off all these stats, and then they all came true. I was like, this dude's like a psychic. So I'm going with whatever he thinks for the Rams games from now on. So why don't we actually start with that one? Let's start with Rams and Eagles. Who do you have? It's in Philadelphia on Sunday. Who do you have in that game?
After watching Philly against the Packers, I thought they were pretty beatable. It's not like they can't come out and do some damage this week, but I mean, hell, after picking the Vikings, and I really thought that they were going to like shape up after that Lions game. I thought that they were going to be able to protect Darnold. Clearly, they couldn't. Darnold turned into a pumpkin, like all the memes. And I'll pick the Rams. I'll say the Rams upset them just because if the Rams play the same type of game that they played against the Vikings, I think they have a really good shot. I think it's going to be close either way, but I'll pick the Rams.
Yeah, Rams have been big plays on D. I mean, they've had some really good games of like 6 weeks on defense. They got a really young defensive core with Young and Turner and Verse and all those guys that are clearly playmakers, difference makers. I am going to go with the Eagles though. 2 All-Pro tackles should help Hurts and Barkley especially. Just really opens up the offense. So I could see the Rams winning. I definitely could. They're the type of team, like Stafford's won a Super Bowl. They still got McVay, type of team that could make a surprise run. But I think I'm going to stick with the Eagles in this one. And then who do you have in the other NFC game, which is Commanders at Lions on Saturday night?
Man, I want to pick the Commanders, but I think the Lions are going to win. I think the Lions are, again, another team that's beatable, probably more so than Philly. I mean, conventional wisdom would tell you that Philly should probably be picked by me, but I'll go with the upset and the Rams. But with this one, I can't go with the upset. I think the Lions will win this week. I think they have a good shot of losing to either the Rams or the Eagles. I think both teams are hotter than the Lions. I think that layoff by the Lions is going to hurt them a little bit. They're going to be fired up for this game for sure. I think with the Lions, the biggest thing that they have to avoid is that I'm not a believer in Dan Campbell when it comes down to making actual coaching decisions. He makes decisions in big games based off of his gut and like he's playing, Madden online after coming home from the bar at like 2:30 in the morning, and he's just going for everything. I mean, seriously, that's how he operates, and they basically run around trying to bully everybody. And I think it's going to come to bite them in the end. The Commanders they're a very young team. They can't really stop the run too well. I think Gibbs is going to run all over them. I think that Jane Daniels, though he's great and I love the guy, he's one of my favorite players in the league right now, who's a non-Packer. But I think it'll be too tough against the Lions. So I think the Lions will win handedly, and I think they're going to have some trouble next week with whoever, or the following week with whoever they play, Lions or the Rams or the Eagles.
I'm going with the Lions too. And Daniel's a rookie, and that doesn't mean he can't win. But Lions can beat you in so many ways on offense. And I know you had enough. You don't want to say any more good things about the Lions. I understand
I hate them. I really do. I hate them. I hate everything about
You're
them.
like, yeah, the Commanders. You know, Commanders, Frank Louvu and Bobby Wagner both banged up. Both should play, but that could impact especially Louvu. Covering Laporta or switching on defenders. So I think you know even though the Commanders should be healthy, the Lions are just a really strong team, and I really think they're kind of destined to be at the very least in the NFC Championship. So I'm going to go with the Lions too. Let's shift to the AFC for the other Saturday game, which is the Texans at the Chiefs. I think Texans surprised both of us last week, surprised a lot of people when they just blew out Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh. So who do you have in the Texans Chiefs game?
Well, the games, the way them winning surprised me, but the way they won didn't. Like
The way they
I
won.
mentioned last week, Nico Collins had to go off, and I mean he went
You
off.
did.
So
You
that was
called
like
it. Yeah.
that was the only shot that they had at winning. And also didn't think that Herbert was going to play like he's never
Garbage.
played a football game before. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's like that again is smoke and mirrors. I don't think they're going to stand a shot against the Chiefs. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised honestly if the Chiefs were up like 2 to 3 scores going into the fourth quarter. I don't think it's going to be close. I think they're going to come out. The Chiefs have something to prove. Every single win that they have has been like dissected and picked apart, and all they do is consistently win. If I had to pick anybody that I trust the most um, in the league to win a Super Bowl, it's going to be Mahomes and Andy Reid. I don't like the Chiefs. I don't like Kelsey. I don't like any of the traveling circus that's about them. I love Patrick Mahomes. I think he's great, but I think it's inevitable, honestly, that they're going to go to the Super Bowl. I had them picked at the beginning of the year. I thought they were going to go back. I'm not going to stop now. I'll pick them every week, especially at home against, I think, a below average or an average at best Texans team.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I'll go with the Chiefs. This could go a number of ways. I could see that maybe the Chiefs blow them out. They beat them by a score, 8 points a few weeks ago. But like I say, the Chiefs played some just so many close games. Like they were a blocked field goal away from losing to Denver. They lost to Buffalo. I mean, it's a team like that can be beat, but somehow we see Mahomes every year. They seem to just get by, right? And they seem to like in the playoffs just kind of turn it up. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs at home. I just think that I don't know if they're destined to win, but I definitely they're going to have a tough matchup next week, regardless of who they play. But I think they'll win. All right, the last game Sunday is what a lot of people would probably consider to be a Super Bowl caliber matchup. You can make an argument that these are the two best teams in the NFL, or two of the most talented anyway. So, Bills and Ravens. Who do you have in that game?
This is really tough. If you'd have talked to me last year, I think everybody, if anyone's listening to this that actually knows me personally, they know that I'm not a big Lamar fan. Not because I don't think he's like a good guy or a good player, but when it comes to like picking him, at the same level as like other quarterbacks, other elite quarterbacks. But at this point, like I saw something this year. If you look at the analytics, if you look at his QBR and basically his passing metric, it's the best he's ever played in his career. It could be, you could chalk it up to like Derrick Henry changing that for him and the way that they, maybe give him some more options off the play action. Maybe he's looking to throw off of some easier looks where they're playing the run more from somebody other than him. Before it was just everybody on defense is keying on him with the run and the pass. Now you have Derrick Henry and you can't do that. So he's getting more space and he's looking to throw instead of always running. I mean, he'll run obviously. So I just think he's playing a better brand of football. The QBR numbers back that up. And I'll roll with them. I think that overall the Ravens are playing much better defense. If you look at their numbers the last like 4 or 5 weeks, there was a time where they were struggling on defense. I think they turned it around right after the Philly game. I believe they struggled, and then after that that defense kicked it into high gear, and I don't know if they've even come close to really giving up more than 20 points the last maybe like 4 or 5 weeks. So they're just like they're at their peak. I will say the problem with the Bills again is just that it's all on Allen. And like we saw it last week, like the time that they were struggling, where it was kind of a close game until they obviously blew them out in the second half. It all was riding on Allen. Like he came out pretty hot and then he kind of cooled off and the offense kind of mellowed out. They couldn't really run the ball. They just weren't converting on third down. It was just kind of middling through the rest of the first half. And then he came out just, I mean, hitting deep shots. It's wherever he goes. And I just think that's too much. It's too much to have one guy just carry everything. I think the Ravens can beat you a couple different ways now with Henry. You could ride him if they're trying to shut down the pass and he can't get anybody open. There's just too many different ways to beat you. And the defense, obviously, too. They get a couple stops and, they're right in it. So I think the Ravens are going to win.
Yeah, spreads -1. Obviously, it's in Buffalo. They played earlier in the year. It's 35-10. Ravens been blowing people out the last 4 or 5 weeks. They beat Houston 31-2. Had no trouble with the Steelers last week. And I mean, honestly, Henry out there is looking like he's just playing against peewee, competition. And when he gets downhill, he's just impossible to stop. He had 199 rushing yards against the Bills earlier in the season. And like you said, the defense schemes for the Ravens are always really airtight. Every year in, year out, they're well coached. So, but this is going to be whatever happens. This is going to be like the narrative street game, right? Like whatever quarterback loses, it's going to be Allen can't win the big game or Jackson can't win the big game, and then it'll probably be the same if the winner of this loses to the Chiefs, So it is interesting to see Lamar's about to win his third MVP. As Allen arguably has more to prove in some ways, right? Because he got no MVP, not going to have any MVPs, and he's not going to have any Super Bowls if he doesn't win this week. So that's going to be a really good game. So looks like we got most of the same picks except for the Rams Eagles, but we'll check back in next week maybe for the conference championship picks. Let's move into mail day. Do you have anything, or is it just me this week?
Just you this week. I don't have anything.
Good deal. I had posted them both on Instagram already. I had two 2022 gold prisms, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, both PSA 10s. That I thought it was a nice pairing. That design it's not my favorite design, but I like it better than the 2021. So I'm trying to do these pairings, and I thought that was a good one. I've been enjoying picking up some of these modern cards. I got a bunch of other ones, but I'm trying to take a page out of Andy's book and some other guys' books and try to wait till I get the cards in to kind of post them in some order where they're in a complementary fashion. So, two gold prisms next to each other, had the two Origins blank slates next to each other. So I'm trying to do that. But yeah, I've enjoyed picking the modern stuff up. Again, it's really not nearly as expensive as I had thought. I guess I just hadn't checked, sales in a long time before I got back into it. And so it's been nice picking cards up for, anywhere from $150 to $400, instead of having the expensive taste of '90s of $2,000 cards all the time. So that's all I've got. I'll have more to talk about next week. We'll skip card of the week this week just because we got a lot of listener questions, and then we want to get into the presentation. So, Brian, why don't you go ahead and start us with our listener questions here?
At Retro Basketball Breaks asks, it seems like 90s grails are being discovered daily. Will the market ever run dry?
It's a great question because we've seen a ton of them unearthed in the last year and a half. I mean, cards that we've talked about, the Rice Gem Masters, the Favre 98 Gem Masters, a bunch of cards that, I'm sure I'm forgetting tons of them, but a bunch of cards, the Iverson that's on auction now, the 97 now out of 3. just a ton of cards being unearthed. But it makes you have to. There's so many other ones that we haven't seen. We could reel off a bunch of cards. Like, haven't seen a Barry Sanders green PMG in quite a while. Right? Like, there's a lot of one of ones and low numbered things that we could think of. But to Zach's point here, like, there's going to be ups and downs, right? This is definitely a peak time for the 90s market. But we'll have to see some downturn because as these grails get locked up, they may not reemerge for a while. Maybe other quote unquote grails will, but I think for the time being, I still think we'll start to see some coming out because of these sales. I mean, they're just a lot of them are public sales, even if, well, I should say private sales that are being made public, or they're cards that are on auction. And so people see that, and maybe they go check a shoebox, or they have been holding something that they got for 5 years ago for a lot less, and they're like, now's the time to sell it. So any number of reasons why we could still see more. But I don't know if the market will ever run dry necessarily, just because there's always some new set or new thing that people will look at buying. Like super frackers and black finites are really hot right now. You know what I mean? But that hype will die down. Not that those cards won't be important, but the rapidly increasing prices and demand may taper off a little bit as we move along. What do you think?
I don't think it's going to dry up necessarily. I think um, with every sale, it it looks like some of the sales go to people who are trying to flip them or resell them, or not hold them for a while, and then or not hold them forever. And then some of the sales obviously go to collectors as they fall in collectors' hands. Then maybe they won't sell as much. So it really just depends. It's relative to like the card, the set, things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of we're going to talk about one of ones, today and then multiple future episodes. But there's a lot of '90s stuff that pretty much seems like a 101. I mean, there's a lot of the stuff that's some of the PMGs out of 50, the stuff out of, the 24 carats and stuff like that. There's just not a ton of them unearthed yet. So they feel like 101s. But again, like collections get dug up, and you look at like vintage, for example, think of how many cards there are in like the 50s baseball market. How many of each card is printed? There's how many
Mm-hmm.
52 mantles are. I think there's like a couple thousand or something that we know of, and there's still more being discovered regularly, and those have been around since the 50s. So the 90s being relatively new in terms of like this type of value and people discovering this stuff, the discovery price. As that continues to rise, people will discover more of them and know that they're good cards and get them to market. So I think eventually, you could see more come to market just because of the pricing. And over the years, people digging through old five rows or something in basements of houses, grandparents' houses that kept their kids and grandkids cards, and just put them in a shoebox or something, and people find them when if they pass away or something, it goes to an estate sale, and then they start selling them, and they do it with 50s cards, and there's way more, and those have been around since the 50s. So I mean, there's no reason why they can't you can't keep discovering these. They still discover stuff that's got thousands of in the print run. They'll continue to find this stuff, I think, especially the cards that are like the 97 essential credentials. They're out of 100, but you feel like sometimes you don't there should be more on market than there are. Like take the FAR, for example, like one sells every, I don't know, few months publicly, but like you'd think
Mm-hmm.
something out of 100 would sell more often. But down the road, people continue to find those things, and they'll probably sell more often.
Yeah, and people that buy these grails, even if they are true collectors, maybe they don't keep them forever. Maybe something new comes along and they want to move on, or they want to rehome it to play another player or set collector or something. All right, next one at Bye Bye Baby Cards. Brian, this is specifically for you. What is your beef with Terrell Owens? Because you guys are not friends
I,
anymore, I've heard.
I mean, I loved Terrell Owens, I guess, as a player, just his sheer ability, but um, I think he likes to just run his mouth a lot now, and he's not really relevant. So I feel like he just tries to become relevant. So when that whole Favre and Mark Gastineau thing uh, went off, and the median was all over the place. Terrell Owens, who had nothing to do with it, obviously had to jump in on social media and start trying to rip Favre for stealing welfare money. So, I mean, I'm not Brett Favre's caretaker. You know, he can obviously fight his own battles, but I just get tired of. I'm kind of like at my peak uh, tiredness, I guess if that's a word, of Terrell Owens, and just he finds a way to like insert himself and become relevant. I get tired of people like that, and Terrell Owens is the epitome of that. So, and if you come at Brett
Fighting
Favre, I
words.
just kind of like it. Yeah, I mean, I just think he's kind of a joke to me at this point.
Well, so if anyone's listening and has some Terrell Owens cards they want to send to Brian, you could send them to me and I'll make sure he gets them. So I know
I
he's
do
going to
like his
start a
cards,
secret
and
PC. Yeah, he's got a
I
good.
hate what he did to the Packers in '99. So he essentially
Yeah.
ended Mike Holmgren's run with the Packers, and among other
Oh,
things.
yeah.
So, but he was just a good player, so I can't really knock him for that. Let's see. The next question is at Collectomaniac. Why do we have to submit 10 of the same '90s card to PSA to psychologically get a good grade? And he kind of clarified that a little
Okay.
bit for me. So basically, what he said was he was just trying to like the psychological trick of sending one great copy in with a bunch of cards, and then assuming that like he feels like the grader will get like I don't know, just a handful of cards, and you throw like one or two that you think are really good in there mixed in with a bunch of other ones, and you think that like the grader might in the same order get like lazy with it and just maybe throw some tens in there mixed in with like lower grades. So like the psychology of sending in a bunch of a card, like maybe a high pop card, just to
Mm,
make sure you get a grade or two in there. So some people think that grading works that way. I don't know.
yeah.
What do you think?
This is like something you would tell your grandkids. Like back in my day, I'd throw in some really good. It's like an old wives' tale, you know. It's just I cannot imagine that this is true in any way. I mean, it's modern cards are better, of course, in better condition, but I don't think they're going to be like, oh, this modern card gets a 10. Let me look at this fraying PMG and give it a 9 or whatever. I mean, I think if you grade with PSA, and you obviously like what they're doing if you're continuing to submit. I mean, if you're not trying to resell them, then, you know, just take what you get because, like, this guy annoys me when people complain about PSA's inconsistency because I know it's frustrating to go submit a card that you think is an 8 and it comes back a 6, right? But at the same time, like, and you resubmit it and it's an 8, but like they have thousands and millions of cards that they're grading and they cannot ensure unless it's AI or some computer grading every single card, there's going to be human error and two people are going to have different opinions. And I think I drew this opinion or drew this parallel in a chat, which is like you could have two, qualified real estate appraisers look at the same piece of property and come to different determinations about the condition or the value of the property. It doesn't mean that either one of them is necessarily wrong. And so, as far as this question goes, like if you really want tens, I mean, don't send 90s cards. It's just like almost all the tens that we see for old 90s cards are old slabs. I mean, like I'd love to get some data on what the gem rate on 90s cards was in 2024, or something. I mean, I don't know if they would keep data as specific as that, but that would tell us a lot. I mean, am I right? Like most of the tens we see are, or even nines we see are like older slabs where you can even look at the card and see it's not in as, it wouldn't get a 9 or 10 by today's standards.
Yeah, it's like when I was buying the Playmaker Cedar Favre. I bought the person I bought it from had all the I think it was 4 gem copies. It was 3 PSA 10s for that card for that Favre, and then one BGS 95. Gave me the option of like one of the 2 PSA 10s he was selling. He was keeping one of the PSA 10s because he has the entire Playmaker Series set in PSA 10. And then he was selling 2 of the other ones, and then the BGS 95. He sent me scans of all of them and let me pick. And I picked the BGS 9.5 just because I thought it looked better than the PSA 10s. There was no way that the two PSA 10s are actually PSA 10s. They're probably nines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think they're at least they're going to be nines. I don't think they were eights. But the BGS 9.5 that I have is probably, I don't think it's a PSA 10, but it looked like it had a better shot at it. To me, it was the only reason
Mm-hmm.
why it didn't get a gem grade is because on the back there's like one little chip. But sometimes with that set in those cards, PSA will give a 10 if you have a little chip. But these other PSA 10s were in old slabs and there were some corner issues and stuff. There was no way they were 10s. So I mean, I think most of them are old slabs. I don't think you there's no way you're minting like PMGs or rubies or any. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Wasn't what's the PSA 10 rubies, the 97 rubies? Is that an old the Favre? Is that an old slab? I
Oh,
can't remember.
Paul's. Yeah, it's an old
Yeah,
one. It's like a
is
O 02. I think it starts with O 02, or I think it starts with a 0 or 2. It's like a really low
I
number.
I mean, maybe he'll probably listen to this and message me about it. But I heard from somebody that that's a pretty clean card, so that actually probably does have. That's probably one of the few that has a shot that would be an actual PSA 10. So
I
people
did
have
see
seen
that
it.
actually in person, and it is clean. It's definitely clean, but I still think it's like an 8 or 9 based on, and that's no slight to Paul or to the card or anything like that. It just, you look at those and it's just they're so condition sensitive that unless it's like incredibly pristine, it'd be hard to, because they don't really seem to give any lenience towards 90s because it's 90s. They keep it sort of on this objective scale, but it's a great card and it looks good in the PSA 10 slab. All right, next question. Black Hat underscore cards. Brian, will Aaron Rodgers lead the Vikings to a Super Bowl in 2026? If not, where will he be?
People are just picking apart stuff that I've said over the week
You're
with Andy
just
with
like you're
Terrell
on
Owens,
trial
and now,
tonight.
yeah, now
Jeez.
he's coming at me. I, I hope not. I didn't really saw it, like when Favre was on the Vikings. I didn't really hate on him. I didn't want to lose to him. Like it was really painful to lose to him at Lambeau and have him play the way he did. But even like right after that game, he was one of the first ones to say that it's just a matter of time before Aaron Rodgers wins a Super Bowl. And then he did a couple years after. He said it's just a little early for him right now and that team, but they're going to win a Super Bowl, and they did a couple years. So you know it was good to see, like knowing that you have a quarterback of the future, and then you saw Favre in the Vikings gear. I still rooted for him. I didn't root for the Vikings team, but if he would have went there, I wanted him to beat the Saints. I hated the Saints at the time, so I guess the same thing would happen if Rodgers went there. I'd want to see him do good. Um, I don't know if I'd necessarily be rooting for him. It's really tough for me to say. I really don't think he's going to go there anyway, though, because uh, I think he's the type of person in his older age. I think if you looked at him maybe like 5 years ago, and if anybody's watched the Enigma documentary, he's kind of at peace, and he's tried to work through being at peace with letting stuff go and just kind of being comfortable with himself and everything else around him. And I think he wants to be embraced by Packers fans. He talks a lot about Green Bay and the Packers. Even now, if you've listened to some of the stuff he said at McAfee over the past couple of years, and even in post game press conference and stuff when they bring up the Packers, he wants to be embraced by the fans there. He wants to be embraced by the community and the team. He doesn't want to go through the waves that Favre kind of went through, where it took a little bit of time for them to bring him back because he went to the Vikings and played so well. I think he wants to go. When somebody asked him, I think it was a few weeks ago, what you're going to do when you do retire, he's like, you're probably not going to see much of me. I'm either going to be, I think he said, somewhere in California, or maybe around Green Bay or once in a while. So I mean, I think he wants to still go back there and be a part of that organization, to kind of do visits and things like that. He likes that. He likes the attention he gets from the Green Bay fans and that. So I don't think he's going to want to go through what he saw Favre doing and kind of burning bridges there for a while. I think he's going to stay away from that team. With that being said, I would expect to see him playing next year. I don't think he's retiring, no matter what he
Yeah.
says. And there's a lot of reporters and beat writers that are close to him in Wisconsin that come on shows even now and say that they don't see him hanging them up. They think he's going to play, and he's still got some juice left in the tank. I could see him in Pittsburgh. It seems the most obvious
Mm-hmm.
to me. I think that the Browns now, I think they got some type of workout with Deshaun Watson with that injury, him
Yeah, he
re-injuring. I
tore that
think he can actually
Achilles.
get out.
Yeah.
I think they can get out of that. If they can get out of the contract and they can do some cap magic, the Browns thing is kind of interesting to me because I think that you could see them trying to at least bring him in. I don't know if he's going to go there, but I think Pittsburgh is the
Mm-hmm.
is the most obvious option.
Yeah, I do too. Because I think you need like you get teams like I mean the Browns, the Titans, the Raiders, the Giants all have high draft picks. They're not very close to. I mean,
They're on the
Rodgers needs
brink.
something that's yeah. That Rodgers needs somewhere like Pittsburgh made the playoffs, right? I think that they may bring back Wilson. You know, he's a bit younger. The Vikings obviously they're not gonna sign him just because they've got McCarthy and they may try to pay Darn. One thing I was thinking about if they could put their if they could look at it as a sunk cost, maybe the Colts. You know, if they could bench Richardson, you know, if they could just live with the fact that that guy's going to be a backup, you know, I doubt he's going to be a starter. Like just we have really have not seen much at all, except for some explosive plays here and there. And I get there's issues with the coaching staff, et cetera, but you know, Rodgers it kind of fits that bill where with Rivers, Wentz, Ryan all went there. Maybe Colts fans probably do not want to hear me say like that Rodgers could go there, but I'm just trying to think of teams that are somewhat close to contention, at least to the playoffs, that need a quarterback. And when you look at all the teams in the playoffs this year and the ones that were almost in, they all had quarterbacks, and so it's hard to know what he'll be doing. But I agree. I don't think he'll retire. Okay, this next one. This is from your fiance Jenny. I'm not going to give out her handle, but she wants to know what is the ugliest looking card out there. So what do you have for your choice? Go through your box of your favorite ugly cards and see what you got.
Yeah, it's really like subjective, and
Yeah.
there's some designs that I think are pretty ugly. I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. What I would say would be the ugliest. There's designs that are ugly throughout the decades, but this is a recent one that I just thought was it might be more ridiculous than ugly. It's probably a good amount of both. I don't even know what year this is. It's a wild card, non-licensed called Monster Hunt. It's Brett
Mm-hmm.
Favre and Dracula behind him. It looks like he's biting him in the ass. So that's
Giving a little extra pep in his step there.
yeah.
A little
The
ass
people at
bite.
Wild Card are really wild.
A little
I don't know.
risque.
It's a
Yeah.
101. So, um, but it's probably equally stupid as it is ugly. What do you got?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with the Leaf. Is it Leaf? The Dynamite cards. Is that what they're? Is it Leaf? Right? Is that what they're?
Yeah.
That looks. It's got like a Stegosaurus on the card with the player, and there's a bunch of like sparkly parallels and stuff like that. And yes, it's Dino Dino Might, and looks like it's written Comic Sans or something like that. Honorable mention. So it's funny. Like I've some of the Prism manga cards I've actually kind of grown on me. But Leaf, if people didn't know, Leaf makes like a budget version called Anime Nation, which is really terrible. Like I was looking at this Puka Nakua one here, and it's just a picture of him that looks nothing like him, and then it just says "Gotta catch the balls."
It looks like a
It's like
it looks like like a 50-year-old guy that's sitting on a
it
bus
does.
tailgate or
Poor Puka Nakua. He
look
just
at
looks
it.
like a
Man, they did
trucker.
him
Yeah,
dirty.
they
He looks
really
like an old
did.
trucker.
And look at
Man.
this. Look at the Troy Aikman. Look at the Troy Aikman seduction look with the microphone. Look at him with the little cowboy hat. It
The
looks like a male
creepy old
stripper.
guy.
Yeah. So I guess
Oh,
those are like just the unbranded stuff. We were having some trouble thinking of some. So if you have some really like ugly cards or some really poorly designed ones, please send them to us and we can like do bring some up on the next show because I'm sure there are some that we're forgetting.
They do a really bad job. Like I gotta say, like the Leaf and the wild card stuff, the unlicensed stuff, they do a
Mm-hmm.
terrible job with designing. I mean, unlicensed, like if you look at the
Yeah.
baseball prism, like I get really close to actually almost buying some baseball prism because they look really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So at least
Yeah.
like they do a good job of designing them. But the wild card and the Leaf, they just they're terrible
Mm.
designs. Sticker autos, goofy looking font, terrible borders. The parallels don't make any sense. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's crazy. Let's see. We got Maze Sports at Maze.sports. They write, have you ever bought a card that you waited for so long in the mail that when the mail day came, the cards lost some of the luster that made you buy it in the first place?
Oh yeah, this has happened to everybody like multiple times. Like you
You're
buy a
lying if
card,
you
you're
said
so
this didn't
excited.
happen to you.
Yeah, you're if you're like it's not me, yeah, you're a liar. It's definitely happened to you because you get cards sometimes in the mail, you open them and you're like, this one's it looked better online. MC Sports Cards picture looked better, or whatever. Um, it's inevitable, and I think that the hard part is just like cutting your losses, right? I mean, don't if you like the card, keep it, but if it's just not what you want, and you spend $1,000 on it, don't be afraid to resell it. I'm trying to think of like some examples where this has actually happened to like a specific card that I got it. I definitely think there was some um, when I was doing the modern the first time. There were definitely some cards I got. Part of it was because the thrill of like buying a big card is there, and then you get it, and you're like, this card's cool, but I feel really, really anxious about having a card this expensive of a quarterback who's like a Josh Allen, right? Like that in 2020, we didn't know, really 2021, you don't know what Josh Allen's going to be. It fluctuates every week and everything's at a high. But yeah, in general, I don't feel bad if this happens to you. It's a sobering effect. You can't love every single card that you get.
Yeah, and then you start questioning like, why am I buying Josh Allen cards? Am I a
Yeah.
Bills fan? No.
Yeah.
Like what
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
doing here? Like
Right.
um
Right. Yeah.
for me, I don't it's not even so much like the length of time. I think for me it's I have a real serious problem with uh doing this like it's not impulse buying, but it's like, oh, I'm gonna start this player PC would be cool. And it's not like I'm filling a gap for like, the cards I'm looking for aren't coming up, so I go buy something else to fill the void. No, like when I buy stuff, I think I'm gonna keep it forever, all the time. Like I
Right. Yeah.
there's there I don't remember a time in at least the last like 4 or 5 years that I bought a card where I didn't think I was going to keep the thing forever. There's been
Mm-hmm.
maybe a couple times over the years where I'd see something at like a really good price and be like, oh, I know I could buy that and just quick flip it and make some money because it's so cheap. Maybe like two or
Mm-hmm.
three times over the last 4 years. But I buy everything thinking, well, I'm going to start this new PC. I'm going to do the entire run. This is going to be great. This is awesome. I go to my spreadsheet. I start looking on trade card database, make the list, get everything. All this is exciting. I buy my first one or two cards. Then they come like a week later or 2 weeks later. And I'm just like, why did I do this? I don't want to do this anymore. And then
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I cut my losses. And people might look at that as like that's stupid. Like, why are you doing it? But I think it's better than somebody who just like buys all this stuff and just hoards it and then is like, God, I wish I didn't buy
Mm-hmm.
this. God, I wish I didn't. Well, then sell the damn thing. Like it's not. It's a card.
Mm-hmm.
It's a card. I'm not buying it to like flip it. And anybody knows that who's bought cards from me that I've just decided not to keep anymore. They know that I'm not selling for profit. So, I mean, anybody can attest to that I
Right.
sold a card to. They can see the comps. I don't make any money. I most of the time lose, and I don't care. I just don't want to hear anymore, and I just move on. So or I trade out of it.
Yeah. I think you have to do that. You have to start PCs that you don't keep. Like that's
Well,
like
that's
part
because
of the
you learn what you like.
process, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's finding your way. If everybody kept every PC they started, they're just, it'd be too cumbersome, and I don't think everybody could afford that. And so I agree. I think you just sometimes got to go through the experimentation and cut your losses if you don't really love it. All right, last one before we get into the 101 from Drake. at Drake's PC. In general, most hardcore hobbyists are not a fan of and don't collect IP autos and prefer pack pulled autos. However, if you look at several examples, trouble talking, data tells you that these cards are valued more than unsigned cards by some. For example, the unsigned Griffey 89 Upper Deck PSA 10 sells for around $2,500. A signed PSA 10 with a 10 auto copy sold for $11,800 on December 31st, 2024. Why do you think the hobby largely shuns IP autos, yet an IP auto in this case sold for almost 5x? And who is buying these? Good
So
question.
I think he hit the nail on the head when he talked about the 89 Griffey, and then there's also you can look online with the 90 Leaf Frank Thomas, the PSA 10 90 Leaf Frank Thomas. I can't remember what it sells for, but it's significantly lower than the 90 Leaf Frank Thomas 10 with a 10 auto. Same with I think I saw somebody got like a I think somebody got a no name Tops Thomas signed as well, and it sold for
Mm,
more than just the no name Thomas did in a high grade. So I think you got to look at the years. You got to look at the cards that we're talking about here. These are high pop cards. They're cards where there's so many of them that people are trying to find ways to increase value after market and out of pack. And then with a lot of those cards, the people that are buying those are ones that are, they like the nostalgia. They used to get autographs in person at ballparks back in the 90s, like I did regularly. They like the combination of autographs and then these high pop cards, and they don't see themselves as like really necessarily ruining the card because there's so many of them. I mean,
mm-hmm.
there's a million of the Griffey cards, the 89. So there's guys that just fill whole binders with the 89 Upper Deck Griffey, and then if they got something signed, they think it's cool to have a 10-10. So I think it's really the type of collector. uh, you're not going to see any. I guarantee if you got like a 101 signed or like a low a gold prism signed or something like that, you're going to ruin the car. It's going to sell for like fractions of what
Yeah.
a non-signed one is. It's really the card. Anybody signs a PMG, I mean, people aren't buying that stuff. So it's really the type of card. Vintage stuff is different too because with vintage, it's not even so much that the cards are super high pop, but like a signed 52 tops mantle is historic because there's just he can't sign anymore. There's not many of them around either of signed 52 tops. If I had a choice that I want it signed or would I just want a nice copy of the 52 tops, I would take the unsigned copy, but I wouldn't really complain about having a signed copy of that card either, just because it's like doubly important to have a mantle autograph and then on that card there's just a handful of them around. So that's more of like the historic reference. Like if you had a Jackie Robinson 48 leaf sign, I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna complain about that. Like to find a Jackie Robinson autograph in
Mm-hmm.
general is impossible, and then have it on his rookie card, like, that's crazy. So there's just different scenarios with each type of card.
All right, let's transition to our one of one series. Before Brian hops into the presentation, um, you had a story you wanted to share about a Ryan Braun collector who reached out. What happened there?
So a guy, I would say, I think a couple days ago, he messaged me, and I saw that he added me on Instagram. I can't remember. I'm not going to share the name, but then it was just like a regular account. It wasn't like a card account, and I just didn't think anything of it. And then on he messaged me on, I think it was on Facebook Messenger, and he said, "Hey, I noticed that you had the 2005 tops Ryan Braun Superfractor." He's like, "That used to be mine. Really regretted selling it." He showed me a link to a Ryan Braun collectors group on Facebook that I didn't know existed. I don't meet many Ryan Braun collectors. And then he said, by the way, I have like 40 superfractors and even more 101s of Ryan Braun. Like, I'm a huge collector. And then he started telling me a story about how he got into collecting Ryan Braun and how he never sells his stuff, but he was kind of forced to sell this Ryan Braun. But he got into collecting Ryan Braun because his son was sick for a pretty long time, and he had to spend a lot of time in the hospital. And to kind of pass the time and kill the time, he'd float around on eBay, and he picked up his first bronze superfractor, and then it just kind of spiraled out of there because it was like his favorite player, and that's all he collects. So he kind of just gathered up all these superfractors over the years, and he kind of had to sell the 2005. He told me, to kind of cover some costs of some medical stuff. So, I mean, I'm sitting here with this Grail card. He's like, the thing is like, basically like one. I feel like it's like one of my kids. It's I don't ever sell any of my stuff, and I had to move that one. It was my most expensive one, and he wasn't like saying, "Oh, sell it back to me. I want it," but we were just having a conversation about Braun, and pretty much agreed that we'll continue to do that. And he's got some really cool cards, and it's just cool to meet somebody else that has Braun, and he used to have my card that I have now, and he loves that card. And he's like, no, I mean, he's like, you keep it, and it's good that I can see it. You're like, I'm just glad that it went to somebody who really likes Ryan Braun and collects them. So hearing that story about the 101s and his story kind of brought me to this like epiphany that's probably been brought up by a few people, that 101 collecting, though some people say like, well, I'm not going to get into that because it's a 101. Like, either A, I can't afford it, or B, like, it's a 101 and I don't really collect those. I like to collect stuff that other people collect, and then we can talk about it and whatever. But the thing with 101s is that there is a collecting group and a lot of people that collect 101s, that you don't have to have the exact same card, but 101s and 101 collecting kind of brings people together because there's a lot of different 101s out there. And you meet other 101 collectors of different players, teams, whatever, and it kind of, I think you have better stories and discussions, in my opinion, with 101s. They're one of a kind cards than you do if like you're collecting stuff that's got 2000 print run, things like that. So I just think it's really unique. And I thought, well, let's do a series and talk about a lot of the main key 101s over the years, but then also bring in a lot of the ones that people don't talk about so much, because there's thousands of 101s out there through the years of baseball, football, and basketball. So this episode is mainly just to kind of introduce 101s, what we're doing, what we're going to look at moving forward. Yeah, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Zan.
No, that's a really cool story that you found somebody. You've been collecting Braun for a while, so the fact that there was someone who was almost as much of an avid collector as you that you didn't even know was out there is pretty cool.
But yeah, he blows me out of the water. Like, I thought I was a pretty big collector. He's got just an insane amount of superfractors. Like, I always
Wow.
wonder, like, how can I never find a superfractor of Braun? I rarely ever see them other than the one I have. This is why, because he has them all. I mean, there's other ones out there, but this guy's got most of them. So,
What does that do to your pursuit, like in terms of your chase element now? Like it's cool knowing where they are, but it also is like, well, there's like 7 of them I take off my list I could stop looking for.
yeah, there's even more than that, but there are some 101s out there. I guess I don't, for like Braun. I have his best one, and I don't really feel like I have to scramble to get more. Like, I'll find a couple more, but I like finishing his gold run. I'm kind of getting into these reds out of 5. I think it's cool. I'll start putting some of those together, and then maybe I'll stop for a while until I find another superfractor or something. There's a few out there that I think I can get. So yeah, I mean, it's just, it does kind of hurt a little bit that, there's some I'm not going to get, but I don't have to have every one. So looking at these sets though, so the introduction to these 101s is, if they've been covered on other shows and other podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
but the 101s started in baseball, football, and basketball with the Flair Showcase baseball being released first in spring of 97, and then the 97 Flair Showcase being released in football. And then actually the 97-98 Ultra Basketball was the first 101. And those were considered, they're called the masterpiece A lot of you listeners know about masterpieces. Some of you may not, but on the back of all the cards, whether it's the Flare or Ultra, they say the only one of one masterpiece, meaning that they're kind of like the origin of the one of one card. And if you look at this slide, if you're listening, maybe you switch over to YouTube and take a look at some of the cards I have on here. But I have some of the prices that are listed on here from Card Ladder of just some random recent sales of the Flair Showcase baseball. The thing with the Flair Showcase is that you can tell it's a one-on-one masterpiece because it's got the purple font. That's really the only difference from the base set. And then the Legacies had the blue font. And then on the back, obviously, it says the only one-on-one. But you got the Randy Johnson Row Zero sold for $7,000 in 2022. I think that's the one that Grant had, right? Waldorf.
I think, and that one has come up since. I want to say it was for sale recently, but I don't remember where. I think it sold last year for like 10 grand or something like that, around there. So yeah, that was a big sale. By the way, you just had to get a Jeff Cirillo card in here, didn't you?
I didn't even know what that sold. I saw that sale. It was kind of shocking. I'd love to have that card.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. He doesn't have a ton of one-on-ones, so that's neat. And then I think we talked about this Mariano Rivera full 97 showcase run, didn't we, when it sold? I think that was like our
Yeah, we
card
did. It was
review.
after we did the Flair Showcase episode, but I think we did cover it on briefly on Card of the Week, just to. But 30 grand for 3 cards, that's incredible.
Yeah, and that's really cool run to put together. My biggest issue with these, the base card is like so good that it kind of kills the
Mm-hmm.
parallel because you're only changing the font. That was always my issue with
Yeah.
spending a lot of money on the legacies or they're very important cards, but it's
Yeah.
just I don't know if I can pay that much for just an upgrade in font. I don't know. That's what's bothering
Yeah.
me. So
No, I
it's been a
get
very
that. Like, if
cool
maybe
ride.
if you're a diehard baseball collector, I could see it. Just
Yeah.
quick note on the purple font. They had some of the 98 legacy collections had um, leftover purple foil that was used for the font. So double check the back numbering. So there's some 98 row ones that have purple foil in the name plate that are not masterpieces. They're legacy. So just double check that. But
Wow, it's interesting. I didn't know that. So the next slide I have here is 97, 98 Flair basketball. And although this wasn't technically the first one-on-one masterpiece to be released in the release order, it's the first of the Flair to kind of go with the baseball and football set that we talked about. The interesting part about this, though, is that the basketball configuration changed to 4 rows in 97, 98. So their first release was similar to what you'd see in baseball and football with the 4 rows, and then that like horizontal mojo design, which is really cool. And then the row zero, and then the row one's got that shimmer design that's really popular. I love those two cards designs, just the base or really any of them. And then the baseball and football would release those designs in 1998. So I have the Kobe Bryant listed here. It sold, according to Card Ladder, sold in 2021 for 134K, and then the Rick Smith's sold in March 2024 for $2,482. The row zero horizontal, just beautiful cards.
what's your? I think I asked you this before, but I'm gonna ask it again. What's your favorite of the 97 row zero? So the dots, right? Sparkle effect, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that Randy Johnson, like that
Yeah,
sparkle.
the Randy and the Mariana there. That one, the 98, the horizontal 98 row zero with the Mojo effect, and then the row one shimmer. What's your
I
favorite of those?
still
How would you rank those 3?
I still like the 97. I'd go 97 with this sparkle kind of
Yeah,
background, the
me too.
97 row zero. And then I would go probably the shimmer design, the row one, 98 row one, like the Kobe. And then I'd go third, I'd go the
Mm-hmm.
horizontal mojo.
The Mojo.
I just like
I'd
the
switch
shimmer.
those two. Yeah, the shimmer, I like the pattern. My issue with it on these cards is I just can't. It like the face is always like I feel like it's one of those like things where you're like trying to look for an image in the static, right?
Yeah.
It's like an old lady's face or something.
They're
Yeah,
better in
that's kind
hand.
of what
Like
it
on the
looks like.
scans, they don't look on the scans and the pictures. They don't look as good. Like on this one, you can't really see Kobe in the background, but like in hand, I think they look a little bit better than photos.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really have an issue with that. I could go either way with both of them. I kind of like the shimmer. I don't know. Um, so then here's the 97-98 basketball. This is the first 101 in basketball, and again, like we mentioned with the flare, the issue I have with these is that there's even less of a distinction between what the 101 is. They look exactly like the platinum medallion on the front, the back. You have to turn them over to see that it's a 101 masterpiece. I have the Jordan pictured here, but I don't think there's any public sales. I don't know who has that card. I'm sure it's some high high roller in the
Yeah.
card industry. But then there's the Ray Allen's the highest public sale. I just sold last year in September 2024 for 24,400. Beautiful card. It's just you have to turn over to tell it's a 101.
Right. Yeah, I think we've discussed those before, and it'd be tough for me to pay up, but they do sell pretty well. I got into before the Broncos, card ladder posts those like, which card would you rather have? And it's like two
Yeah.
players that are facing off. They did one for Broncos Bills that was Elway's 97 row zero masterpiece, and it had like which is I think it's a PSA authentic, versus Josh Allen's 2018 Don Russ Optic Gold auto, and it was like, which card's better? And so some guy, I got into a back and forth with some guy about it, and he was like, that Elway's not even a rookie card. It doesn't even have a good grade. And I'm just like, come on, dude. Like, you're way out of your element here with this. And he was like,
Did
well,
you
Elway
know what it
wasn't even
is?
that good. Huh? Yeah,
I
he
mean,
said he did. He's like, yeah, I know all about 90s cards. Like, okay, I don't think so. But and
yeah,
then he was
no.
like, oh, Elway wasn't even that good. I'm like, well, okay, all right, well, yeah, we're talking about him against Josh Allen. We're not talking about him in the grand scheme of all quarterbacks. But anyway,
Um, so the next, what we're looking at here is how these cards were received. So we went over. That's where the 101 started. That's the first released 101s in football, baseball, and basketball. So that's the starting point for 101s. It came from the Fleer company. They were trying to be the first to, create market buzz and get people to buy these sets and try to sell cards. I mean, again, these companies, though, yeah, they're trying to make art and art form in cards and make really cool looking cards, but their overall purpose, just like any card company now, is to sell cards and make money. It's not always necessarily to just design the greatest looking card. So if it sells, they're going to do it. So this was a gimmick at the time, and it was received kind of like one. Masterpieces brought almost as much criticism as it did praise from collectors, and the reason for that is you got to think of in 1997 we're verging on the era of making parallels and making manufactured scarcity like numbered cards, right? And we've gone through, I guess, 40 years or so of people buying cards to just kind of collect player runs or teams and throw them in a binder and get their favorite players on every set that comes out. And they, in years past, if you can remember in the early mid 90s, it was like, even when I was a kid, I remember the kids that you thought had the greatest collection. It wasn't necessarily like who had the lowest serial numbered cards. It was the kid who had, oh my God, like Johnny's got 6 binders of Packers, or he's
mm-hmm.
got like 2 binders full of Ken Griffey Jr. cards. He could trade for days, right? Like it
Right.
wasn't like what the cards were. It was like how many you had. So we're going from volume to like better cards, and it was a tough transition. People that wanted to super collect a player, they're like, well, great, now I can't even collect every card of Ken Griffey Jr. because this stupid company is making a bunch of 101s that I'm never going to pay for and never going to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, 101s forced many player collectors in the 90s to eliminate the idea of attaining all of them. And I mentioned Griffey because I think you mentioned this story
Yeah.
when we were. You want to kind of talk about it again briefly?
Yeah. So there's funny. I have an issue of Beckett back from when that product was released. And so it was really interesting in like capturing the mood of the zeitgeist of collectors, at that time and what they thought of the set. And like you mentioned here, there's a lot of them who are just like they want to collect every card of the player that they collect, and they want to have that. And with 101s, you couldn't do that. And so, yeah, there was one guy who wanted to, he owned a card shop out in California. He's 24 years old, and he had two of the three Griffey masterpieces that he paid like almost 30K for the two of them combined. So even back then, obviously, that's a lot back then. He found the other one, kid in a 17-year-old in Alaska who had pulled it at his shop, a local shop, and he offered him, you have 20, I don't, it says 17.5. He offered him something pretty ludicrous that the kid ended up turning down. So I don't know if he ever got it or not. But there was a card store in Dallas that sold the Rusty Greer masterpiece for like $1,200 at that time, which it might sell for that around that now. And then I think there was a card store in New Jersey as well. They got two of the three Frank Thomas masterpieces like right after release. So it's kind of like, we're seeing with modern where the best time to get the cards are after release. It was the same way with these. Those were sold for about $8,000 a piece. And then my favorite thing was that Fleer Skybox set up an 800 number for card shops to call into to track and verify the masterpiece findings and sightings. And it like reading that made me think about like Willy Wonka, right? Like the golden tickets, it's like
Yeah.
everybody's calling it you got to verify it. And there was something so special about that, but certain collectors were, I think, largely off put by it.
Yeah, this is like the start of a new thing for a lot of people, and it took a little bit for them to get used to it. And it actually, I mean, if you look back, it seems like it took longer to get used to it than even maybe they would have thought. Because really, you look at some of these 101 prices, like in the early 2000s, even like mid 2000s, they weren't selling for much up until like it started to pick up like just before COVID, and it really hit around then. But it's taken a long time to really catch on with the parallels in general, and then now even the 101. So it's taken a little bit. I know even when you talk to a lot of collectors, they like to separate the 101s as their own like separate entity. Like this is the best card non one of one, or this is the best so and so non 101. And I remember listening to a crossover episode where Chris mentioned that he thinks, and I agree with it 100%, people need to stop doing that because it's either like the top card of a player or it's not. So regardless if it's a 101 or not, just because you can't get it or you can't own it, or it's out of your price range, it doesn't mean that it's not an important card. And I think as of now, as of recent, there's a lot of people that even on Instagram, they like to go around and post stories kind of battling 101 collectors or collectors of rare cards, like making fun of the fact that people say, oh, this is significant or this is a big deal. And I don't understand what the problem with it is, because if we can't talk about, and Chris mentioned this on the last crossover, if you listen to it, he mentioned, like, if I can't talk about the importance of a card or a set, or like maybe even monetary value to a point as a reference point, like what are we even talking about then? Like then what are we doing? I can't talk about the
Mm-hmm.
specifics or the details about or the characteristics about the card. You can't say something significant. I mean, that's kind of the fun in it, right? Like we like to
Mm-hmm.
discuss in sports like who we think the best quarterback is, or who we think the best first baseman is of all time. Like that's the fun of it, having those differences in opinions. Why go around and say, well, you can't? Well, I mean, why take away a one of one as being, important to the hobby? So I think the biggest thing is that these cards were important, and they still are. And that's what we want to get from this. But so companies did latch on to this probably faster than collectors did. Then
Mm-hmm.
they saw an inroads to selling product. If people think there's this big chase, and some people have never even seen this card because, again, in the 90s, you don't have social media. you get a hotline to find, where these cards are. So it's the mystery, right? Like, ooh, if I buy these packs or if I buy boxes of this stuff, I could maybe get one of these things. That would be really cool to call into the hotline for Beckett and record, I got one of these. So companies latch on and they start putting in more and more one-on-ones that we're going to get to with different sets in these future episodes. But one of them I have pictured here. I could only find a picture of the hockey print, 1997 Pinnacle press plates. They're printing plates. So the first printing plates, they did them in baseball and football. I don't believe they did them in
Mm-hmm.
basketball until the next year in '98. But they were the first printing plates, and they were like the second one of one, I guess, inserts other than these typical cards in
Yeah.
'97 to try to capitalize on the one of one thing, right?
I have one. I have a Paul Molitor that I actually pulled myself when I was a kid. I didn't know what a printing plate was. So I was like, what is this metal card? And my dad was like, whoa, it's a 101, and there's like this kid behind the counter with wing sauce all over his fingers being like, oh, that's so awesome. Like, let me look at him like, no, no. Yeah, this is at our local shop, which was, if you're from anyone's from Atlanta or particularly Alpharetta, it's called Collector's Dream back in the day. And yeah, so I pulled the Paul Molitor press plate, but that's kind of cool. Is It's kind of more of a novelty than anything. But at the same time, there was something neat about, wow, this was used in the actual printing process of making a card, and it's just kind of a different, it gives a different flavor to opening packs if you're a collector.
Yeah, I think it is kind of cool if you had like the entire like rainbow, so to speak, of like of a card, and then you had like all of the printing plates too. So you had like all of like the types of parallels of the card, then all of the different color printing plates together. It's kind of cool to like complete the actual rainbow. I'm not like a printing plate guy, but I think they are kind of cool if in certain aspects. So some of the goals that we want to have moving forward here and some of the stuff we want to cover, a lot of different shows cover one-on-ones, but we want to highlight a variety of one-on-one parallels, including ones that aren't really mainstream. So ones that aren't really mentioned. We're obviously going to go through the obvious ones and the main ones, the ones that, we think are, here's that word, significant in the hobby, right? But we're also going to, and the ones that we like to collect, we're also going to talk about some, not so common ones that are kind of cool and maybe lost in the shuffle a little bit moving forward. So we want to have multiple shows, many shows as we can of different one-on-one parallel sets, and maybe you'll turn some people on to exploring some different one-on-ones. And if you think of one-on-one like, oh my God, that's too expensive, I can't afford it, that's why we're going to talk about this. Not every one-on-one is super expensive. There's plenty of one-on-ones that are very affordable and a lot of times cheaper than common parallels that I see people buy on a regular occasion. So it'd be good. I think we can dig into some of those and bring them out. And there are some really cool ones that don't get talked about a lot. We also want to talk about collectors who focus primarily on one-on-one parallels and how their mindset is different, than other collectors and common collectors. And I kind of mentioned that a little bit. When you're hunting one-of-one cards, it's kind of like it's the ultimate challenge. You have to go and do it with a different approach. And we just wanted to pick the brains of some people that solely collect one-on-ones and see where their mind's at and how they approach, maybe consolidating or moving cards, or if they even can move cards. Because if you have one-on-ones, it's like you can't really sell them, right? You want to keep them. So it's a different approach, and we want to explore that more. And then we want to tell the story of the one-on-one parallel in general and how it grew to prominence today. And it's mainly it's the big chase now, bigger than ever. It's in a lot of different sets, and companies use one-on-ones to this day to really market everything. So I've pictured here the Jerry Rice Gem Masters that we're going to talk about in this series. Then the Bryce Harper Superfractor Auto that's listed there from Bowman, and then it looks like a Brady Shield, an early Brady Shield from 2008
Yeah.
Leaf. I believe it's just really cool. Some of those old early 2000s presentations of shields are really neat. And then the Giannis, the Mosaic from that set, there's two one-on-ones. There's a black and then the black Mosaic, which is essentially the finite. But yeah, basketball they have the black parallels as opposed to the finite. So that's what kind of separates football apart from that.
Good stuff. We've got a lot to unpack, obviously, with 25 plus years of one of ones. Um, we're going to try to hit as many as we can. If there are specific ones you want us to talk a little bit about that maybe are underrated or, that people just don't think about quite as much, please let us know. We're always open to suggestions. We look forward to hearing from some collectors as well about how they approach one-on-one collecting, because neither Brian nor I is predominantly a one-on-one collector, and we each have some, but it'll be interesting to see how you approach that and the things that you do as a collector. So looking forward to that. Hope you guys will join us on that journey. We'll catch you next week.